We are proud to count Tom and Hunt Big Sales as a partner of Pipeliner CRM and believe this webinar will offer you some great sales advice. So without further ado, here's Tom and Unlocking Explosive Growth.
Eric, thanks so much. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk to the Pipeliner audience and really appreciate the sponsorship and the relationship that we have with our two companies. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we overlap in different kinds of things. But I want to jump right into this idea of the 10x growth strategy. We've got salespeople, sales leaders, and sales managers on today's webinar. And all of us are looking for something more than just quota making strategies. We're looking for, how do I break through the barriers of growth? So sometimes there's an opinion, I've got a $500,000 quota, I've got a $10 million quota, and I'm going to try and see if I can't make 105% of my quota or 110% of my quota. And that means that you grew incrementally. If your quota is $1 million, then if you did $1.1 million, you would have made that 10% growth. I think that is self-limiting, and I think it keeps you outside of the opportunity for explosive growth. And so today I want to talk about the 3 M's of 10x growth. Now, here's the thing. The 3 M's are pretty simple to remember, and so I'm going to kind of take you through those. M number 1 is mindset. Now, I'm a straightforward guy. I'm a straight shooter. Mindset is not a lot about rah, rah, rah. Mindset is about making a shift from one particular set of mind that keeps you in the particular performance area that you are currently, and shifting your mind to a new area that unlocks that 10x growth opportunity inside of you. I moved from being someone that sold and managed organizations that sold, $10,000 types of implementations and solutions and products. And right now I have on my list 18 deals that are bigger than 9 figures. So bigger than $100 million in size, and the biggest deal that I've had an opportunity to participate with a team in closing is $1.5 billion. So I've been at one mindset. I had to dramatically shift that mindset. We're going to talk about the 5 key pieces of mindset shift. Second thing is that of the 3 M's is mechanics. You can have an Olympic mindset, but if you don't understand the Olympic mechanics, you're never going to break a record or participate at the highest levels of performance. You have to understand the mechanics that make incredible performance happen. So it's not just about a positive attitude, or it's not just about a perspective of opportunity. It really comes down to also having the durability and the endurance to go through the mechanics. And the third thing is we're going to talk about magic. Yeah, anybody who's involved in sales recognizes that there's a component of magic. Right place, right time, right person, whatever that is, creates a certain amount of magic to get your deals done. So those are the 3 M's. I want to start off with mindset. Where you are right now, what you believe is possible, has a definitional limitation on your ability to produce. Put a different way, people and organizations are perfectly designed to achieve their current results. See, you're designed, what you're doing, how you think, what skills you have are all components in producing what you're getting right now. And I'm going to refer to what you're getting right now as the 1X mindset. 1X mindset simply says we're going to take X. And so if you're a $1 million producer, then that's your X. And if you're a $1 billion producer, that's your X. We're trying to get to a mindset of 10X. So we're going to focus on your mindset. There's 5 shifts I want to talk to you about making. Mindset shift number 1 is shifting from me to we. Now, there's a part of me that always listens to webinars or speeches and keynotes, and I listen for the kind of the trite and the simplistic, the things that I say to myself, come on, really? That teamwork stuff and all the rest of it, I get it, but move on to the meat and potatoes. Here's some things I want you to understand statistically. In the last 5 years, the number of people that are involved in significant buying decisions inside of your customer base has moved from 3 people to 7. On the biggest deals that you sell, inside of the buying organizations in which you are selling into, they no longer rely on 1 to 3 people. They are now moving into as many as 7 people. And when they speak to you and that you're selling to them, they're not looking to buy 7 on 1, which means they're not looking to buy from one person. It makes them feel vulnerable. It makes them feel like they don't have enough resources in your company to purchase from your company. because they only have you? Me to we mindset says that buying processes change selling processes, and you're going to need to bring more people with you to offset the people to whom you're selling. By the way, just so you understand statistically, that number is growing. The belief is that there will continue to be an increasing number of people participating in the buying. Think about procurement, purchasing, the finance department. Think about technology and the IT group that gets involved in the conversation. You can't pave a parking lot without an IT person involved. They seem to come into everything. So wherever we sold in the past, it was all relationship based and our own personal charisma and contacts that made us successful. That has dramatically shifted and will continue to shift. So we have to move from me to we. The second piece is we have to move from time to leverage. Now, we just talked a little bit about that in the 1X mindset to the 10X mindset. So time versus leverage is critical. The idea that I only have X number of hours in a week and what I produce out of that is a one-for-one exchange is a little bit mythological. It's not really truth. I'll tell a personal story. Very recently, I was having a conversation with someone with whom I work, someone very, very talented. She's incredibly effective, and yet we talked about the difference in our mindsets. As we were talking, I said to her, have you ever noticed that when a problem faces me or a challenge faces me or an obstacle faces me, what's the first question I ask? And she said to me, she said, well, you always ask, who can I assign, who can I hire, or who can I partner with to fix this? I said, you're absolutely right. I'm always looking for leverage by getting somebody else to help me figure out how to overcome the obstacle, overcome the challenge, overcome the problem. And I said, and how do you solve this? And that's what I said to her. And she said, she kind of bowed her head for a second. She goes, I always try to figure out how I can work more hours or how I can fix it myself. Yourself is a low leverage answer. High leverage answer, trying to figure out how I can work with someone else who can produce that result with less of my time and more of their time. Now, this isn't just about conning somebody into doing your work or persuading somebody to take it on. I'm looking for people who love to do that particular thing, which is overcome that obstacle or that challenge or that problem that I'm not any good at. So leverage is about getting someone who's fantastic at doing something to do that which I am not fantastic at. The third mindset shift is shifting from what you sell to what you need to solve. Mindset 1 is the iron triangle. It's about selling product, quality, service, or price. We call that the iron triangle because product and quality are one point on the triangle, service is another, and price is the other. So there's the iron triangle. And that's the typical model of selling to managers. It's the typical model of selling to lower level buyers. And when you talk to the lower level buyer, you are dealing with a lower level spend authority and you're dealing with a lower level of understanding of real solutions. The mindset shift has to be to the 10X mindset. You want to understand what is the business to business problem that you can solve. Now, if you're taking notes right now, this particular phrase might be worth writing down, and that is, you get sent to whom you sound like. You get sent to whom you sound like. If you are talking about products, quality, service, and price, you're going to spend time with managers, front-end users, and directors. If you are talking about time, money, and risk at the level of the outcome you produce, you're going to spend more time with directors, vice presidents, presidents, and owners. Mindset shift says, I want to get sent to someone else. I deserve to be sent to someone else, and I want to talk about the problems that that person uniquely has. Fourth mindset shift. 1X mindset shift says, what is their budget? 10X mindset says, I don't care what their budget is. You know, there's an old story about Adair. Adair, for those folks who are generationally not of my generation, Adair was a guy who put out oil rig fires. That was his whole living. He put out oil rig in the middle of the desert, in the middle of the ocean, doesn't matter where. And one of the stories that's told about Adair, and remember, Adair was played in a black and white movie by John Wayne, so this was some time ago. He's in his office with another guy, and the phone rings, and Adair picks it up. And the guy on the other end of the line is talking to him. Adair says, yeah, okay, you got an oil rig fire? Yeah. Okay, and where is it? Okay, great, all right. And then the other guy on the other end of the line keeps talking and talking. And Adair finally just goes, pfft, and he hangs up the phone. Well, the guy in the office asks him, says, what was that about? He says, oh, guy's got a oil rig fire. And he goes, yeah. He goes, that's what we do. We put him out. He goes, yeah, I know. He goes, well, why didn't you talk to him anymore? He goes, listen, the guy wanted to know how much it was going to cost to put out the oil rig fire. And the guy who's in the room with him says, well, why don't you tell him? And he goes, listen, a man asks you how much it's going to cost to put out an oil rig fire. It hasn't been burning long enough. You want to get out of the world of answering price questions inside a budget, and you want to get into the world of how long has the oil rig fire been burning. When people need to get a problem solved, budget goes into second place, solution goes into first place. That's a mindset choice. When we walk in the room and we ask, what is your budget? We've already defined that this is a price conversation, not a problem conversation. Mindset shift number 4. Number 5, we have to move our mindset from frontline level buyers to what we call executive sponsors. Now, executive sponsors, I've written a great deal about executive sponsors. You can go to my website, which is at the end of today's webinar, which is at huntbigsales.com. And there's a variety of free materials that are on there. One of them is about executive sponsors. Executive sponsors is not just about a title. It's about specific behavioral action that they have to be capable of doing. So I won't go into all of that right now, but I'm going to tell you, shifting who you think the buyer is to the executive sponsor is transformational in the mindset. So if you look at these 5 things, when you shift from the left-hand side of 1x to 10x, it changes what you believe is possible and to whom you are speaking about what is necessary for them to do. You know, we move that out into real simple language, and we talk about the size of the buy is equal to the size of the problem. When you're selling on the left-hand side, you're saying, okay, fine, you buy paper. How much paper do you need? How cheap can I get it to you, and how much, and still make a margin and a commission? Wrong answer. You need to move to the right-hand side if you're going to move outside of budget. So that's the 5 areas of mindset. Here's the thing I'm going to tell you. You cannot use effectively the mechanics that I'm going to teach you in just a few moments that we're going to talk about today if you don't have the right mindset. So let's move on to the idea of magic before we get to mechanics. Magic is those things in life that you have influence over but you don't control. Most of the people on this call have bumped into someone at some point in their career. On a cold Saturday morning, if you've got kids playing soccer, you're standing out there, your hands are in your jacket, maybe you're drinking a cup of coffee, you're standing next to somebody else, and you just strike up a conversation, and who knows, by the end of the soccer game, you find out that's the senior vice president of buying really important big things, and you are the person who sells really important and big things, and he's agreed to see you for a meeting, and things are off and to the races. That's awesome. That's called magic. And magic happens. But that's an opportunity that you can influence but you don't control. And I'm going to tell you, in sales, it's 90% process that makes you successful and 10% magic. So you're going to have some magic, and I'm a fan of that. Magic includes things like the opportunity itself, the chemistry between you and other people, and the idea that market circumstances happen. For example, one of your competitors goes out of business, or something happens with the transition of one of the leaders inside of one of your buying companies, or some place that you've been kind of boxed out of because there was a special relationship from the organization and that guy either retires or gets fired. All of those things are market circumstances. You don't control them, but when they happen, you have to be ready to influence them. You have to be ready for opportunity. All right, so I've talked about 2 M's of the 3 M's. I talked about mindset, and I went through it rather quickly, but I will tell you that I think that when I see people, sales organizations and sales leaders and sales people themselves, when I spend time with them, I find that rarely do they need 2 more creative closes or 4 more ways to overcome an objection, or a couple of clever ways to get around a gatekeeper. Most of the real good performers have figured that out. They've either read up on it or they have watched videos on it. They've been to training sessions on it. They're pretty good at it. When I look at why they are incremental performers, it's because they think like incremental performers. They've got the mindset wrong. If you have the mindset wrong, you won't see the magic when it happens. So that's why we covered mindset. We've talked about magic. But I'm going to tell you, the thing that you can work on inside of a tool, a machine like the hunt process that Pipeliner does such a great job of putting the gauges on the outside of, is those mechanics that I think make a big difference. Now, I'm going to push a couple of your idea buttons a little bit hard today. And again, by the way, like was said at the very beginning, if you're talking, if you've got questions, go ahead and enter those in the chat. We'll get to those as they come along the way. So if something strikes you, I won't answer it in the middle of the webinar, but at the end, we'll be happy to go ahead and bring those out. Let's talk about those mechanics I was telling you about. So when you're looking at the mechanics, there's a couple things I want you to change. First, I want you to change your belief that there's such a thing as one pipeline. I'm going to teach you a way to look at it so that there are 3 pipelines today, and you're going to track them differently. You're going to think about them differently. You're going to measure success and failure differently in those 3 pipelines. Right now, more than likely, and I work with hundreds and hundreds of companies, you are tracking it as if it was one pipeline, and it leads to false positives and false negatives as to whether you're being successful or not in your sales pipeline. So we're going to talk about 3 pipelines. We're also going to talk about how to measure different kinds of success milestones. I have this conversation with CEOs and owners a lot of the time. They get a sales pipeline report, right? And the report always looks kind of like this. It says, okay, it's got the name of a company and the size of a deal and when the deal is supposed to be done for this year, how much revenue is supposed to be realized, and it says what stage are we in the sales process, and then it says what's the percentage likelihood that we're going to land that. And that all gets multiplied against each other, and at the very end of the Excel spreadsheet or the document, we calculate the value of that amortized amount of the pipeline value. And I always ask the owners, can you get a loan from the bank for that? And they always laugh and they say, no, I can't get it. I said, would you write a check on that? They go, no, I wouldn't. And I said, well, why not? And he goes, well, we don't trust it. I go, well, why don't you trust it? And it's simple. It's because we all believe that salespeople are pathologically optimistic. Now, some people would use the negative term. They'd say they're liars. I'm not using that word. I'm saying you're pathologically optimistic. And by the way, I'm grateful you're pathologically optimistic. Nobody wants a pathologically pessimistic salesperson. Pathologically pessimistic salesperson would say, yesterday stunk, but today's going to be worse. We want pathologically optimistic people who get out there regardless of rejection or frustration or an inability to get to the executive decision maker and get out there and hit it again day after day. But those same qualities that make you pathologically optimistic mean that with the pipeline, if all we do is just take the word of a salesperson without some stronger milestone to measure it against, we're going to get a pathologically optimistic pipeline, and that's why you can't borrow against it, and that's why owners and business presidents don't trust it. And the final piece I'm going to talk about inside of the mechanics is the inflection points. There are a couple of key places inside of the sales process and the overall pipelines that make the biggest difference. And if you can get those right and understand when they happen, you will find yourself with more of a 10x growth. Matter of fact, when we get to one of these, I'm going to point it out. And I'm going to tell you that if you get to this particular stage, that inflection point, you have almost a guaranteed 50% chance of winning those large account deals. And when I look at large account deals, I look at those deals that are 5 to 10 times the size of your average deal or represent 3 to 5% or more of your overall portfolio of accounts. All right, so let's get to the mechanics. Now I'm going to show you some pipelines. And really, I say that pipelines are 3 phases of the same overall. So your pipeline right now probably includes, I should be careful about saying that, probably includes one pipeline called prospecting, sales process, and onboarding and growing, right? So we onboard, penetrate, and grow. I don't think that that is one pipeline. And I think if you manage it as one pipeline, you put yourself strongly at risk of false negatives and false positives. Let me give you for instance, in the prospecting pipeline, you make a contact with someone inside of a company or a government organization or any kind of a buying body, and that relationship inside of prospecting could take anywhere from 1 week to develop into a sales process, or it could take several years based upon contract cycles, position of that individual, and so on. If you include that prospect inside of your regular sales pipeline, you will be asked at every sales meeting, what's going on with that big name company or that big name group? Well, how come we haven't moved farther forward with that? And how come you're spending so much time and energy developing that relationship? That's because it's in your sales pipeline. And I'm going to tell you it's not. Pipeline number one is a prospecting pipeline. It should be carved out and set aside from your sales process pipeline. Now, the sales process pipeline, and I'm going to talk about where that starts in just a moment. The sales process pipeline, even for the biggest deals that are out there, and as I've said before, I've got 18 that are bigger than nine figures or larger, and one of them is over $1 billion in size. Those pipelines, when we really look at what they mean for the sales process, are less than 6 to 9 months, many of them less than 3 months. But even on my biggest deals ever, they were less than 9 months because the sales process starts at a particular point and ends at a particular point. So that's the second pipeline, is actually the sales process. The third process is the onboarding, penetrating, and growing pipeline, and it needs to be looked at separately. So if you were looking at this in Excel spreadsheets, you'd have 3 tabs. When you look at this in Pipeliner in the near future, you would be looking at a way to break that into 3 pieces so that you could look at them separately. My prospecting pipeline may be looking like between a week and 2 years. My sales process, no more than 6 to 9 months. My onboarding and growing probably goes out project by project or contract by contract towards the future. So if you look at that 3 pipelines, then how do I know where one ends and another one starts? Well, we look at these as inflection points. And inflection point number 1 is the executive sponsor. When you move from having an interested party to an executive sponsor, that's when the sales process begins. Now, I told you that you can find the information about the executive sponsor online at huntbigsales.com. We've cleverly hidden it underneath a navigation bar that says free stuff. So if you go to the free stuff section and type in executive sponsor, you'll be able to search for it. But I'll give you the fast answer on executive sponsor. The executive sponsor has to have the problem that you solve. They have to have urgency to get it solved inside of the next 6 to 12 months. They have to have contract sign-off, whether that's a purchase order, statement of work, master service level agreement, or a true contract. It doesn't matter. They have to be one of the signatories on that. They have to be willing to do 5 things for you. They have to be willing to make it a priority for their people to talk to you. They have to be willing to give it access to those particular people. They have to provide clarity when things don't make sense to you. They have to stay in the loop, and they have to be willing to break log jams when things happen. When you have all of what I just described, called an executive sponsor, the likelihood you're going to win a deal in the sales process is 50%. What I see salespeople oftentimes do, and sales organizations do, is they try to move all of that, getting that kind of confidence and support and etc., into the sales process, which means that they don't know if the person really has the kind of problem that we solve. They're not certain about what the urgency is to get it completed. They're not positive about what the buying process, including contract signature, looks like, and they haven't really gotten a commitment that the person's going to do anything for them. Well, you're not in a selling process. You are in a prospecting process when you do that, and you put yourself at risk. I'm going to tell you the sales process, pipeline number 2, starts when you get an executive sponsor. Everything up until then is called prospecting. Now, the second inflection point is the statement of work, contract, purchase order, or master service level agreement. Now, you can see that to the right-hand side at the end of the sales process. That means once we've signed that, the sales process has ended, and now we're on to a new process of onboarding, growing, and penetrating. Many of us on this call right now can point to the history of our deals inside of current companies, and some of our best customers are those customers who give us more business over time. And so they continue to give us that particular business and add more contracts and more statements of work and so on. Perfect. But the process of expanding an account is different from the inside when you've landed a contract than it was to acquire an account. And that's why there's 3 pipelines, 3 simple pipelines that allow you to manage these processes and expectations differently. Prospecting, a week to 2 years. Sales process, no more than 6 to 9 months and maybe less. Onboarding and growing, something that you're going to evaluate quarterly to see if there isn't additional needs along the way. So, Those three pipelines allow you to look at the mechanics. And this is the mechanics that we're talking about. When you go to pipeline or CRM, what you have the opportunity to do is in a stage gate process, you break down your sales process. Many, if not most of you on this call right now use a CRM system, or you use the pipeline or CRM system. I happen to be a big fan of the pipeline or CRM because I think it gets me the information I need to have, but whatever system you're using, the key to this is when you look at that, you are now looking at a dashboard of performance. Now, if I let my salespeople tell me that I'm at stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4 in a sales process without any gauges along the way, then I just have to try and trust that what they see as the time and effort to move forward to a proposal has occurred. But if I move to behavior gauges, or what we refer to as engagement gauges, then I have a model that has a lot more weight to being able to measure, did it really happen? So this is where we put in our success milestones. Now, these engagement gauges, that's our term for it. It's on the left-hand side of what you see in that diagram right there. On the left-hand side, it says their people and our people, their information and our information, and cycle time. So there's 5 gauges. When we do this work in our academy and we bring companies in and walk them through the development of this, they say, well, we kind of do this, which means you kind of don't. And that's the same thing where you wind up with, the world-class Olympic athletes. They don't kind of do it the same way every time. They do it exactly the same way. They do the imagination, the visualization, the training in particular ways so that they can refine their performance to a level of excellence that allows them to get the same kind of positive outcomes each and every time. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, at each stage along the way with the success milestones, I'm looking for specific behaviors. Which of their people, their meaning our prospect people, are they bringing to the sales process? Because if certain people aren't showing up at certain times along the way, then I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have to wind up dealing with them later. If any more in a large deal anymore, if you think you're going to avoid purchasing, procurement, or finance, you're fooling yourself. These folks are going to be there at some point, or contracts, or compliance, or one of the other necessary departments. I want to bring those people into the conversation as early as I can, but it's still at the point that I can generate interest. Because if I wait till later, and we've all been in this meeting, right? We think we're at the closing session, right? We get to the meeting, we bring a couple people with us from our team, they've got the people we've been dealing with, and somebody walks into the room from their side, somebody we've never seen before. And the person sits down and says, it's really nice to meet you guys. I'm hearing an awful lot about you from inside the organization, and I don't want to interrupt what you guys have been working on up till now. I know we're getting pretty close to closing, but before you guys go ahead and sign off on any contracts or agree to any scopes of work, I just have to kind of ask this question. Why the hell are we doing this? Oh, well, thanks so much. I'm glad you didn't want to interrupt. I'm glad you didn't want to go ahead and take us off the rails. I'm glad you didn't want to mess up the remainder of my sales conversation. If you don't bring them in earlier, they're going to come, and when they come, they're going to interrupt what you're doing. You have less chance to influence them. So I would rather develop a sales process where I've got the right people identified at each stage along the way in the sales process and invite them into that conversation.
When we look at the cycle time piece, each stage in the sales process takes a different amount of time. You may know that from the point that you generate interest to securing an executive sponsor should take about 4 weeks. When you do your needs assessment, if it's rather specific in the way that it's laid out, it might take you as many as 4 to 8 weeks to complete it, or you might be able to do it in an afternoon. My point is that cycle time is a way to measure the period of time it takes to accomplish all of the stage gate process pieces, like their people and our people, their information and our information along the way, and then jump to the next stage in the process. So what you have right now is a set of mechanics that lay out a sales process not based upon where you think they go, but what must be completed before you move from one stage to the next stage. An example has been included in what you're looking at on screen right now, where, for example, we decide that we need an executive sponsor, and that's our primary contact. There's certain people from our side of the organization that have to meet with them. We need to get certain kinds of information from that. We call that a prospect scan. And then our information, we want to show them what our business acceptance process is. And between that and meeting one, when we meet with the kind of a team of buyers, that takes about 3 weeks for our executive sponsor to assemble the right people and for us to have the right people from our team ready for that meeting. There's certain information that we have to get completed in that particular meeting, and there's certain things that we share. So as you go from left to right, what you see is a specific stage gate process. And all that means is that every one of the columns, executive sponsor, meeting one, assessment, and so on, is a stage. And you have to complete all of the little punch lists in that stage for the gate to open to move to the next stage in that stage gate process. So that's how you open that gate. What we find with sales organizations that follow this is that they land the transformational deals. There's a question out there that we're going to get to here in a couple minutes, which is there's a way to get in front of executives at companies that are larger than your historic average. Absolutely. There's a variety of pieces, and there's some free materials that we have around that we'll come back to here in a couple of moments. But that's one of the questions, because you've got to get to that executive sponsor. Starting out low and going high takes a long, long time. So you have to figure out if there's a way to get past that. We teach that in a program called Big Sale Factory 1, and we teach it in Storming the Castle as well. But some of those materials are available online at our website. So let's bring this all together. All right. First thing that has to happen is the mindset change must happen. Organizations are perfectly designed to achieve their current results. If you look at yourself and you look at your company, your mindset is a limiter on what your performance looks like. You have to make that change in the way you think about things before changing your mechanics. So change your design. Second thing, remember, if you don't have the mindset and the mechanics put together, then you will not be ready for the magic. Recently, I was working with an organization who almost blew a big deal. And the reason they did was because the person who was talking to the executive sponsor was asked the question, have you ever done a deal this big before? And the person's immediate response was, no, I've never done a deal this big before. And the buyer was like, oh, okay. And he was going to let it go. Fortunately, the company that works with us and had gone into that conversation had the right mindset. And the owner of the company who was in that room from our side said to the buyer, candidly, no one in the industry has done a deal this big before, not in one deal. But when you put together the key components of your deal, we've done many deals that look like your deal, except in this case, we get to do all of it at one time. Now, that was truth. Both those statements were truth, but it was that issue of being ready when the opportunity happened and looking at the mindset and the mechanics to be ready to say, of course we can handle this as well, if not better, than anybody else. So preparedness is based as much on mechanics and mindset, not just one. Last thing I would say is that mechanics, remember I said at the very beginning that success is 90% process and 10% magic. I really believe that success is a system. It's a way of approaching that large account sales model with a roadmap so that you are focused 100% on who is supposed to do what at each stage in the process, instead of focusing on the idea of where do I have a relationship, and will this person particularly, that I've developed this relationship, will they push me through, will they get me to the right person, and so on. That's old thinking. That's 2005 thinking. New thinking says we, not me. New thinking says trust, not relationships. New thinking says how do I leverage the people on my team rather than just trying to leverage my time. So for us, we believe success is the system, and we think that Pipeliner is the GPS. They give you where do you sit inside of the system and what do you need to do next. Nice job of presenting for people when they're managing multiple sales in the process along the way what they should do next. So before I go into questions, I just want to tell you thank you very much. Thanks to Pipeliner, Eric and Rachel and the team for giving us a chance to talk about some of these ideas of the 3 M's for 10X growth. The fact is that we work with hundreds and hundreds of companies, and this is an explosive growth model. You can get weekly tips. They come free advice on 10x sales growth, as well as we'll send you the Big Deal Odds Maker tool. I went back and diagnosed hundreds and hundreds of deals, and what I did was I came up with a template that if you ask the template questions in order, and there's about 9 of them, you can score on your biggest deals ever what is the likelihood that you'll land that contract. In addition, and so if you go to that huntbigsales.com/10x tips, in addition, it gives you some indicator of where the gaps are that you need to fill in by doing some different things.